Before we start digging into this story of Abram and this adventure that God invited him on, and all of the twists and turns that Abram's life ended up taking, I wonder if your lives have ever gone on some unexpected twists and turns that you never expected. I wonder if you can relate to John Lennon, who said, "Life is what happens while you're busy making other plans." Does your life look like what you imagined it would look like when you were younger? I wonder, are you doing for a living what you thought you would be doing for a living? Or did you do for a living what you thought you would be doing for a living back before you were a grown-up? Do you live in the place where you thought you would be living? Maybe some of you say, "Yeah, I always wanted to live in Fargo-Moorhead, and I am here, and it's awesome, and I never want to leave." Others of you thought, "Never in a million years would I be sitting right here in this place on this day." I myself left Moorhead after I graduated from college and thought, "I am never coming back here." And then 12 years later, I got called back by God and Good Shepherd. And here's the crazy thing. I came back willingly, and I actually like my life here. That's crazy. I think family is a big one. Do any of you have families that look like you imagined they would look like? If you imagined what your family would be years down the road, does it look like that? There are so many people that wanted to have kids, and yet they deal with infertility, and their families are not going to look like they had once imagined. There are also people who were not ready for kids or thought they were all done with kids, and surprise, a baby. That happens quite often as well. Or maybe you thought you'd get married and you didn't get married, and maybe you have a circle of friends that you would actually consider your family, and you have had to redefine what family means to you and how you want to spend your life and who you want to spend your life with. Or maybe your family has been touched by illness or death, and it looks very different than what you thought. Or maybe you look at your life and you thought, "I never thought I would get divorced and have to reconfigure my life." There are so many things in life that we just cannot control for. I'm sure that each and every one of us has had life take them on a path in some way that they never thought that they would be going down. I think for most of us, at certain stages in life, we're really just muddling our way through. And it's only when we can look back on a previous chapter of life where we can see how God was there with us. When we can see that God never abandoned us, even at our most uncertain time, even if we were angry or frustrated or just so fed up with not knowing how things would turn out, or that things didn't turn out the way we had hoped. We are calling our teaching series, our sermon series this fall, "This Is Us." And we're following a lot of the same stories that our church school kids are looking at this fall. And we've named it after the TV show, This Is Us. But if you don't watch the TV show, don't worry. You can still follow along and participate. What we've mainly done is just taken some of the ideas from this show, because they set up the show in such a way that this family is always toggling between living their lives in the present and flashing back to an earlier time in the family's life. So through each episode, we as the audience are able to learn through these flashbacks why each person is the way they are. And as the family members themselves look back at the previous chapter in their life and wrestle with it and come to terms with it, they're able to live in the present and move into the future. One of the characters named Kevin, one of the adult children in this family, he looks at a moment in his life, I'm going to share this clip with you, where nothing has turned out the way that he thought. And he's hashing over his life thus far and he's struggling with addiction, and he has not yet hit his rock bottom. But we're going to see how he's looking over his life.
In traffic. Shucks a defender. He looks downfield. He's got a man open, wide open. He sees his entire future. Notre Dame, Heisman Trophy, first-round draft pick, Rookie of the Year, Super Bowl MVP. He sees his dad in the stands as he holds a Super Bowl trophy. His dad's proud of him, like tears down his eyes, proud of him. He says, "That's my son. That's my son." Pearson's about ready to release. He cocks back. Boom! He's down, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, Pearson's down, and he's not getting up. His knee is wrecked. He's not coming back from this one, folks. It is over for Kevin Pearson.
Okay, go call your father. Yeah. Find a phone, page him. Go, go, go. Kate, go.
Will he get up? He will. Ladies and gentlemen, he will. He'll get up. Kevin Pearson will walk again just in time to bury his beloved father. That'll keep him down for good this time, right? Nope. Nope, he's up again. He's up again, and he's marrying a terrific girl. He's off to Hollywood, and it's a happy ending for Kevin Pearson. Oh, whoa, wait, nope, hold on now. He cheats on the girl. Yes, that's right, he loses her. And how's he punished? Well, he gets a sitcom and he makes millions, ladies and gentlemen. Crowd goes wild. What will he do with his lucky second chance? Ladies and gentlemen, he'll blow it. That's what he'll do. He blows it all. Surely the universe has to punish him this time, right? Wrong. He gets the girl back. Now he's got the girl back, and it's a movie this time. And then, clap! Oh! There it goes, the same knee. Bam, he's down again. And he tries so hard to be strong, and he needs painkillers to get through it.
So this was a scene in the middle of Kevin still muddling through. And as he and the other characters in the show start to really come to terms with the things that didn't turn out the way that they'd thought, and accept the joyful times and the hard times, is when they're finally able to start healing and moving forward. Kevin couldn't control that he had a football injury, and he couldn't control that his dad died while he was in high school. But then he also made a bunch of bad choices in his life, and he's got to come to terms with all of it. I think for us, it's often helpful for us to be able to look back and come to terms with all the things that have happened in our lives, both the good things and the hard things, the things we regret and the things we're most proud of. And when we're able to look at those things and place those things in God's hands, we're finally able to keep moving forward. And sometimes it even helps us to look even beyond our own history, back to our biblical families' histories, to see what we can learn about how God showed up for them, so that we can know that God is still showing up for us. So let's look at Abram, this man that we met in Genesis chapter 12. And I told you this is how God introduced himself to Abram. Go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great so that you will be a blessing. That's a pretty big introduction. God makes a huge promise to Abram. He says, I'm going to give you land, I'm going to give you children, and I'm going to make you a blessing. And that third promise has such a weight to it, being a blessing that will be a blessing to all the families of the earth. And how does Abram respond? It says he goes. He picks up his whole life and he says, okay, God, let's go on this adventure. And he's like, God gave me the roadmap, so it's going to just happen now. So he picks up everything and he goes, all of his possessions, and he owned people, and all those servants and all those people, they travel with him and they see the land that God had promised them. But there were Canaanites living there, so he couldn't even go and live in the land that God had promised him. And so then all of a sudden, the plan that Abram thought he'd been given looks quite different, because he's got to move around to all these other places while he can't move to the land that God had promised him and to his offspring. And there's a famine, and at one point he has to move to Egypt. And if you want extra credit, you can read Genesis chapter 12 to like Genesis chapter 25 to get all of the ins and outs of this journey that Abram ended up going on that he never expected. Oh, and then there's one other tiny obstacle that Abram is really frustrated with. God had promised him offspring. And did you pay attention to how old Abraham was when he started this whole adventure? 75. That's pretty old to start out on a whole new adventure and be promised children. His wife was also that age. But I think as we look at Abram's life and all of the paths and twists and turns he went on, he is an example of faithfulness for us. Because what he did as he was struggling with uncertainty is he kept on arguing with God. He would say, God, show me. God, I need to know that I'm still on this path that you have for me. God, he would call out to God. And that's a faithful response. Even if you're mad at God, you're still talking to God. And so he kept doing that. And God would show him a little more. In Genesis chapter 15, God then brought him outside and said, look toward heaven and count the stars if you're able to count them. Then he said to him, so shall your descendants be. And Abram thought, okay, I'm going to have descendants that number the stars. Maybe I'm not supposed to have a child with my wife. Maybe I should have a child with one of my servants named Hagar. And he does that. He has a child with Hagar named Ishmael. And God says, no, that wasn't, I said that you and your wife Sarah would have offspring. And God still provided for Hagar and Ishmael. But then God said, I want to give you another promise. And I'm going to give you new names to match. So God then gives Abram a new name, Abraham, which we're all more familiar with that name. And that means the father of many nations. And he gives Sarai the new name Sarah, which means princess, because she would give birth to princes and kings. So they're given this new promise, and they have to be patient. And maybe they can relate to Lemony Snicket, who said this: what might seem to be a series of unfortunate events may, in fact, be the first steps of a journey. And that brings us to Genesis chapter 21. Don't worry, we're not going backwards, we're going forwards. Because I've covered a whole bunch of territory for you. Genesis chapter 21, where it says, now the Lord dealt with Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had promised. Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to his son whom Sarah bore for him. And Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Now Sarah said, God has brought laughter for me, and all who hear will laugh with me. Who would ever have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. I want you to notice a few things in this passage and with the passage of time. Abraham and Sarah are living into their new names. And did you notice how old Abraham is now? 100 years old. Now, I don't know if they were just doing some exaggeration or some funny math there. I cannot quite fathom being 100 years old and having a child and calling that a blessing. But even if they were exaggerating or stretching the truth in some way, Abraham and Sarah were much older than the average age of parents when this promise came to fruition for them. But another thing I want you to notice at this point is that Sarah laughs. That Abraham and Sarah have seemed to have settled into a trusting relationship with God. They have come to find out that life does not always look the way that you plan it. They have come to learn that God's timing is often very different than our timing. They have come to learn that they cannot control the future, but they can let God be God, and they can place themselves in God's hands as they continue to walk forward, not always making the right choices, but knowing that God is always holding them. And they also learned how to receive the adventures that God invites them on and receive those unexpected miracles as blessings. And they're able to laugh about those crazy, ridiculous ways that God shows up in grace. And they gave their son Isaac, the name, which means laughter. They were able to find a way to embrace all that God had given them and the ways God had left them. If you want to make God laugh, try telling God your plans, is what Woody Allen once said. What I would say is, none of us know what the future holds, but we know who holds the future. And when we know who holds the future, we can relax into that. Keep moving forward, yelling at God as we need to along the way, but knowing that we are never abandoned, and that when we place ourselves into God's hands, we're also able to be a blessing to others and live into that promise that Abram was given long, long ago. Amen.